response, and then we'll open it up for dialogue.
So that was totally amazing, by the way. So to start with that, I don't know quite how this is all supposed to go. So I thought I would start just with a couple of reactions, and then just my reactions. And my reactions are pretty concrete. They're coming from the medical side, and they're these. That story is really what goes on for these individuals and what has been going on for these individuals for decades in the West, where we think we know what we're doing. If I'm going to talk about a broad category, the broad category, we call it intersex. It's basically anything with anybody who has any development that somehow differs from what we consider to be the normal. And the need for secrecy, and the need, the concern with sexuality, and the concern with fertility is just so enormous that there was this rush to make when those kids are discovered, to make them fit to some norm has been really it's been a very strong emotion. And so and then I guess there are kind of two things. Thing one is that when kids are discovered at birth to have any of this, the medical community for decades now has really pushed to surgeries to try to create conformity and doing all with no perspective on whether these kids would even be interested in some of the things that are done to them later. We can go into that. I'd be happy to go into terminology as well. And then the second piece is the fertility piece, which is enormous and it's profound. And I certainly observe it externally. I obviously feel the emotion personally in my own life, but I see it in terms of my patients going through some of these things where, for example, society is so worried about making these people conform in terms of appearance and forgetting the fact that a lot of what the individuals involved are mourning is their fertility. And then as we move into, let's say you heard that I'm running a transgender center over at Boston Medical Center, the transgender individuals, changing appearance, things like that, that's modest compared to risking fertility. And so just an enormous issue for folks along those lines, and a lot of assumptions there. And I think I'll just stop with that, otherwise I'll do all the talking. And I want others just comment, talk, react. Yes?
How common is this for women?
So how common is this? The specific thing is pretty rare. So intersex conditions in general, and that's all comers, including many things that I guess are pretty modest in the sense that they don't have to change these sorts of things, are maybe 1 in 100, so they're pretty common. But this is incredibly rare. There are a couple of syndromes where this can happen, and I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but both of them are pretty rare. Yes?
I'm wondering how, this is a medical question, how one discovers before a girl, for example, reaches puberty, that a uterus is missing. I understand there are other things one would see, obviously, but I don't understand how that would happen.
So the question is, how do we discover one of these conditions? So classically, it happens in puberty. And so it's a pretty shocking time because classically you don't have your period, and then you wait and you wait and you wait and you're like 15 or something, and then that's when you finally, somebody who investigates you in that detail, accept that. And again, it's the patients who I've dealt with, people completely forget the external world is all worried about, I don't know, marrying you off, and they forget the mourning of the fertility, but that's how it comes up, and it's usually a pretty sensitive time too. Yes?
I grew up in Israel, and there's a lot of pressure on women in Israel to children in this world. And it's as if you have no other way for self-fulfillment without having children. So it's very interesting that this work came out of Israel, because I think it highlights the extent to which, I'm sure I'm not very familiar with how this is in the US, but in Israel this is, you're truly broken if, and both as, I imagine as an adolescent, but as a woman, even if you have a uterus and you decide that you don't want to have a child, there's something wrong with you. So there's the social context in which this play has emerged is very compelling, I think, and I think you brought to life the issue beautifully. So thank you.
Yes.
I want to speak a little bit to that, because the play for me is somewhat a metaphor for being a barren woman. Just that word, terrible word, barren. What does it mean for a woman to be barren? And amongst the Orthodox particularly. So this young woman in front of me who talked about Israel. But if you think about it, all over the world it exists, because a woman exists for having a uterus and being able to procreate. And that's the reason you're alive for women. Even though the feminist movement has changed all that in many parts of the world, and certainly in the United States. And I happen to have had a family member who became part of an Orthodox community, and when she could not produce a child, and she did not want to adopt, even though the family wanted to give her all the money in the world. But because of the orthodoxy, we have a sense of it. And it's a very complicated business about the Holocaust, and we're having to replace the number of people who were lost. She committed suicide.
Sir, yes.
I think we all grew up wanting to know why we were named, what we were named. And I guess my question to you is, how did you feel about your parents naming you Fertile?
I think there that shows the hope that the mother had, and I think experiencing it through this lens has been, there's resentment and pain and hope that still exists all in the same space, because to be named that and not to be that, I think is such a curse that feels that you have to carry that and be reminded of it because that's your name. However, I think at the end we see that there's something else that births through her. This rival that she makes within herself to say yes to herself, and so in that way there's a different kind of growth that's happening and blossoming that happens in that I think that she just comes to terms with at the end of the story. And so the new journey begins. So I think there's a lot of hate though, and resentment and mixed feelings and stuff that comes, why Fertile Mom?
But, while you could be physically barren, you could be spiritually fertile.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I mean, that she transcends, she's taking another journey that we see towards the end of the play where there's something else blossoming in her, and I love that you said that, absolutely. I think she comes to terms, Fertile comes to terms with that at the end. Absolutely.
Gentleman in the back there.
You play a lot of different characters in this production. Seems like you had a lot of fun playing Naomi. She seems to be one of the lighter characters. Out of the other characters that I guess I would consider more painful, who did you enjoy, or out of the more painful characters, which one did you like? Which one did you like the most to play?
That's a great question. I think the sister, because she's she's just, I was upset with her. And yeah, I had so much fun doing that because I find that so obnoxious and how cruel and yet, you know, the sister also just wants her to be happy, Fertile to be happy for her, but yet she's being so insensitive. And so I found fun in that, but also the pain and taunting someone in that way and trying to find also the love in it still, you know, she still loves her sister, absolutely, but she's just really unaware of herself and her surroundings.
Maybe on the side here, yeah.
Hi. It's me.
Yeah,
Ramona,
Hi.
I love your characters, and I love, you know, one of them
Or
push
Naomi.
her glasses up, and I was just
Naomi's
imagining how difficult that must be to do that many characters, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process that you go to. Is it a set thing? You think of one unique, you know, physical thing and something about the voice, and how do you keep them straight? And the last question is, do you think like the Screen Actors Guild should have a special pay scale? It's like, that wasn't one performance, that was like 8 or 9 performances. But you and Guy can talk about it.
Speak a little bit louder so Guy can hear you. That's what character actors are. Right? They have the whole other category for character actors. I think that goes along with the question my partner in the back asked about the characters. And yes, so, you know, and there's great eyes that Guy has that helps to guide also me as we play. Had we played longer, had we played, you know, to get off book and everything, the journey's going to continue to evolve as we continue to do these readings. With each character, there might be a gesture that pops out first, might be a physicality, so we know where the voice must live for Amal. Amal is like a rooted, earthy woman, so some of her center of gravity is here in her own womb, in her, you know, she's giving all of that. So there might be certain gestures that come with that. I think Naomi, we played with a little bit, some different things, and came up with this creation that we offer today. And yes, so a gesture, I might think of a costume piece. You know, we're not in that whole mode where I would be changing different costumes. I see Amal in a shawl. The sister, I feel like this gesture for me is where it begins because she's very jittery, and so some of that, she has so much energy, it just comes out of her fingertips and her toes and everything, so the physicality is really tricky. I think the boys also became really tricky because they became this 3-headed monster, and so I was thinking teenage boys, where do they live? And with things. And so that became a little tricky because also the ages. We're also playing different ages. And so the mom lives in a sorrowful, very, very sorrowful place. So her center of gravity is very low. Whereas, the friend chews gum. And that's where we started with her and just saw what came out of her chewing gum and how she often does it. She sneaks the gum in, and how she's a little sassy and young and naive. And the doctor had changed and evolved. And as we play with the physicality, then the voice might follow, or vice versa. Absolutely.
So maybe way in the back, and then we'll come back.
Dr. Safer, as a member of the medical profession, as an endocrinologist who is necessarily trained and accustomed to keeping a certain objective distance from your patients in order to treat them as a professional, I wondered what your reaction was personally to seeing this wonderful performance by Ramona as her total emotional experience, how you deal with that and what you take away from it in terms of your own work, and what difference there is between seeing this performance and dealing with
absolutely. So, so first of all, the idea of maintaining an emotional distance, that's absolutely the case. That's almost a different topic. That's not actually what I personally was reacting to here. What I was reacting to is the mistake we make in the medical profession of only talking to each other in the medical profession. And so, for example, on this subject, we could get completely lost in the genetics and in how these conditions manifest, and the biology, and how interesting it is, and what we could do about it medically or we can't do about it medically, and we completely forget that there are real people to whom this is happening, and very important with a subject like this, who might have completely different, how shall I put this, different reaction than the reaction that we anticipate. And so I think I was alluding to that a little bit at the beginning, how the conventional organized Western medical community, historically and still not now in most of the West, is very focused on everybody looking correct and having the body parts that would look good naked, as it were, and neglecting for people like dysfunction and sexuality and who they're even having sex with anyway, because maybe you're trying to make them, for example, you're trying to make female body parts that will work well for heterosexual sex, and neglecting the fact that you've got a woman who's going to grow up and be a lesbian and not care and be interested in her body parts working otherwise. And so it reminds me how much you have to sit back and listen and listen some more. And on the transgender subject of all coincidences, Friday, we had a task force meeting at the hospital with 2 transgender individuals talking to us, and no surprise, many assumptions of ours, and we're all PC and liberal and doing the right thing and very knowledgeable, and we still had biases and were making mistakes. Yes, so about the 5th rower there. Yes, you, yes.
Did I see you give a TED talk?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But there's another guy out there, and it's really refreshing to hear what you have to say. I don't have a uterus problem, but I had a different body part that had to be removed, and they wanted to hide it rather than, which created more problems than if they would have let it be. So even though thank God, never had a problem, you had, not you. Nevertheless, I understand what you're talking about, but I'm just curious with regard to what surgery and medicine can do. Is there anything one can do medically, surgically, and chronologically for such people so that they can experience less sorrow?
So for the specific situation, the medical intervention really is more for the future, and there isn't. So historically, the answer is no medical intervention. We talk about like the uterus transplant women, and that actually would work for this circumstance, but it's a very big deal. And there's rejection medication and such, so I wouldn't want to suggest that all of a sudden this is going to be the solution. But there's at least that kind of thought on the horizon. But then the third thing, which is how you ended, which is addressing the sorrow. And the third thing, and some of it is, I think we need to recognize there are people who are going to have a big emotional reaction to something that's important to a lot of us. And simply talk about it right up and up front, and emotionally like people, as a human interaction, because that's still where we are.
With empathy.
Exactly. So yeah.
I went to boarding school for junior high and high school. A lot of girls in middle school, we all got periods together. It was pretty evident at what stage each girl was. And we had one girl, Hannah,
Yeah, so she was telling us the story about being in her boarding school, excuse me. And, you know, at one time when they were all going through puberty, they would all get their periods, and all the girls would actually be able, you know, you'd know who had their period at that age because they're so close. And there was one of the girls named Hannah who, around 15, the girls noticed that she hadn't yet received her period. So the boarding house mother ends up taking Hannah to the doctor. And there they found out that Hannah actually was born without a uterus. The parents didn't even know. And so when Hannah got back, word spread a little bit, and so the girls all kind of knew then at that point that Hannah didn't have a uterus. And unfortunately, one of the other girls used it against her and told the boys. And so the boys kind of taunted her and everything. But she was just sharing that she actually had this experience and knew someone that had gone through this.
She's a baby now. She used the surrogate. She got married once and then didn't work out because she couldn't have children. Then she married again, and she had the baby at the end of August.
So now the end of the story for Hannah is that she had a surrogate mother who gave, and now Hannah has a baby girl.
I wanted to ask, I wanted to actually bring up something that came up in our conversations that I think would be an interesting point to explore together, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this. Ramona came in today, and I think it was actually 2 days ago, also said, and said, you know, what do you think? People are going to be coming to the show and they'll hear the word kibbutz and mentioned, you know, and we've taken it out of that cultural context. It's not, you know, this story, I don't know, for you, it rang as if it was happening in Israel or if it was happening to someone here. So, I just sort of want to ask you guys a little bit of how did that work for you in terms of a translation? Did it carry through, and did you feel that this story was alive and could be a part of this culture? Yeah, there's a can right there.
So I waited for that question. I'm here because I know a young lady, the oldest daughter of 6 children, was born without a uterus. Exactly the condition you described. She's born into an Orthodox Jewish family. She lives in New York. When it was discovered at the age of 14 that she did not have a uterus, the father sent her to St. Louis to yeshiva. Separated her from her siblings. Doing it in part so that there would be no impact on her in the New York world. Subsequently, she, after graduating yeshiva, being brought home and going through some psychological counseling, the conversation centered around getting her married. In the Orthodox world, one of the requirements is that if an Orthodox lady or a man has a medical problem, you're obligated to tell the chassan or the chasana. You're actually obligated to reveal that, as opposed to trying to be deceptive. And so the community was somewhat divided about the situation. Eventually, she had to leave the community in order for her to begin to live a life. So she had to leave New York. She ended up in another Orthodox community where the Rebbe was the only one who was aware of it, and found a chassan who was told, and they have subsequently adopted. But it's the community that can cause the problem as much as the condition itself. And that's why I'm here. I wanted to see what it is that you have to share.
Yeah, in the back.
I think that this story can be universal to women all over the world, and that if we happen to use words that aren't something that we use every day in our language, well, that just shows us the bridge between women who happen to be living in Miami, Florida, or women that are living in Ukraine or whatever. There are women going through this all over, and the men that love them going through it, or the women love them going through it as well. And so I think if we
thank you. Yeah, Mary.
What is the Hebrew word for fertile, and is that a name?
Yeah, Poria.
What is it? And is that a name that people are given?
It's, so this is actually an interesting question about the title of this show and her name, that's not her name. The actress who played it, her name is Zoal. You can see it right on the front, Zoal Meidan. But when they went through writing this piece, they felt, and it was sort of co-written by a playwright and this woman who, this is her life experience. She had decided to add this extra layer of, irony in some ways that you can hear it, but also as Ramona pointed out, a form of rebirth in some other ways, a spiritual birth. Thank you to whoever said that. That was beautiful. That's a response to that. Yeah, Wendy.
In response to your question, I think in a word like mensch isn't a problem. People, the story is clearly universal, but the reference to the kibbutz put me in Israel, and then the things that didn't seem to fit that felt a little jarring. So I think I'd either keep it in Israel or take out the reference to the kibbutz and make it vaguer as to where it is. It's just, I tend to like verisimilitude, so not really simple.
And Brenna, yeah.
I'm actually not sure what I'm going to say now because a lot of people have actually said much of what I was going to say. But so I spent 9 years fighting my own infertility, and I think the interesting thing about hearing you speak as a doctor is that I think the doctors that I worked with, they all wanted the best for me. I had, I guess what they call it is secondary infertility, and it happened just after my only daughter had died, so it was like it was a horrible time. And everybody just wanted me to have another baby. They just thought that was the best thing for me. It's not that, and I did manage to finally, produce one. As Roseanne Barr says, that, having a baby is like the most intimate thing you and your 30 fertility specialists can experience together. But I wish, and it's not that I don't, appreciate him and love him and everything, but I wish I hadn't spent 9 years trying to fulfill other people's idea of what was best for me and what was supposed to be, valuable about me. And I think it's wonderful. I love doctors. Doctors have saved my life. They've done amazing things for me. But I also think that, to me, the ideal world is a world where each person can be valued for who they are. And it sounds so corny, but, sometimes it takes a little work to figure out why this person is on this earth and what their real journey is supposed to be about here. And I think that it's hard not to impose value on people based on, not just their sex and their gender, but, even their position in life and, all those things. And it just, for me, it just felt like it had nothing to do with me. And I feel ungrateful saying that because, I had a child. But those were the most horrible 9 years of my life. And I don't ever want to see, a woman or a man, go through trying to make something happen so that other people can see how valuable they are.
I think it's a beautiful message. There was yesterday something personal. As I was getting my haircut, there was a man who came in and we entered into a political debate, which was fun these days. I found him to be far to the right of my, liking, and we engaged in debate for 25 minutes, which ended up raising every hair on my body, and as you can see, I don't lack any. But what came out of it that was interesting was the conclusion that we both came to was the fact that, you know, as Bruna says, we cannot impose values on people that they do not see or want. And it's easier for us, many theater-going audiences being more, you know, more liberal than not, to pigeonhole other people into, you know, into certain corners and not see what they value. And I say that with much difficulty, but I just think something this show brings up is that we see an entire community around this woman not see what she's seeing and imposing a certain convention on her that is obviously not what she would like to embody and be. So I think to take it, you know, out of that context and see it in another context that is present in our lives is something that's often very hard but can be useful.
And I just want to react a little bit too, because what you had to say, I think, is enormous and can't be said enough times to the medical community, to physicians in training. I have one class in all of the 4 years of medical school where I actually cover exactly that. Not for my own personal testimonial, because I'm kind of one of the conventional, as it were, so for me it's nothing. But basically, we have a movie of a documentary by intersex individuals talking about all the things that they had done to them over their childhoods and their lives for their own benefit, with the best of intentions, and all of the, you know, and all the misery that it caused. And it's just very orienting to take a big step back and say, you know, well-intentioned, because it's a group of people who are mission-driven. Why are you going to medical school? And still, with all your mission and all your zeal, to take a step back and recognize that there's a lot, things are just much wider and more heterogeneous.
I want to take this moment to not only thank Josh and Ramona, and they're here with us in spirit, Yakir and Zoal back in Israel, but all of you for opening up your hearts and opening up your minds and sharing stories that are very intimate with us, because it's something that we are so fortunate to have in the theater, to meet people without knowing them, and to suddenly get to know them and hear their stories, and hopefully come out a little more enlightened and also more accepting and more welcoming to differences. So thank you all so much for being here.